I was doing some work for a disc jockey called Tony Blackburn. And then Tony was mentioning me on the radio going, I'm going to see my accountant this afternoon, Colin Newman. I go, whoa. At that stage, then I had contacts with a lot of labels and was lucky enough to manage to buy one of the labels.
Now albums out at that point?
No.
All right, so this was before that time.
Yeah, we kind of pioneered this approach, but it was incredibly difficult.
But you knew the music.
Yeah.
So it's not just the numbers.
It's not just the numbers.
Literally the name of the podcast, isn't it?
What can I say, mate? That's your contribution. And there were quite a few high-profile liquidations where the rights went to somebody who bought the rights without the obligation to pay royalties to the artists.
Really?
There's a lot of artists, even still today, that are being exploited by one of those companies.
Could you give some tips on estate planning, particularly when it's focused on music IPs? Well, Colin, brilliant to have you on the podcast, mate. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, happy.
Obviously, you've got decades of experience in the music business.
Trying to say I'm old?
I wouldn't say, yes, you are old, yeah. Yeah, but you've probably got 40 years in the biz, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, kind of started really around the mid-1960s when I was at training.
Yeah.
And I was basically a bit of a black sheep in the family, not doing anything. And my dad goes, get a job, mate, Okay. And what can I do? He goes, well, you could be a lawyer. Nah, don't fancy that. You could be a doctor. Don't like the sight of blood. He goes,
takes too long.
Takes too long. Yeah, you could be an accountant. I go, what's that? So he told me briefly, and he arranged for me to get some job interviews. And I went for 3 interviews. The first bloke offered me a 5-year contract. It's called Articles at the time, right? And basically, he wanted my dad to pay him 500 quid, and he would train me for 5 years with no wages.
Okay.
Right? Which didn't sound like a great deal.
For me, is that normal in the day, or
it was quite normal.
Right,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It gets worse. Well, it gets better. But the next guy offered me the same deal, but he would basically not take the 500 quid off my dad, but I'd work for 5 years with no wages. So didn't fancy that much either. My dad didn't, because obviously then he'd be paying for me.
Exactly.
So I went to a 3rd interview that he arranged, and he offered me a 5-year contract, fixed term, would train me, and would start paying me 3 guineas a week.
Oh, big money.
Yeah, big money.
Yeah.
So 3 guineas in modern was £3, 3 shillings a week.
Yeah.
Right? And I qualified, I think it was in 1970.
So you took that one?
I took that one.
Yeah,
It was a no-brainer, right?
Yeah, of course.
And I got interviewed in a really nice, beautiful room in Thayer Street in West 1. And I thought, well, this looks good, So I arrived on the Monday morning, only to discover that wasn't his office at all. He had one room at the top of the building.
Oh, really?
And there were 3 of us. There were 3 of us. It was me, him and his wife, and two chairs. So
that could be construed as something different now, Colin.
Yeah, I know, mate. but I thought, well, okay.
Yeah.
And my first job of the day when he came in was to park his car.
Oh, right, okay.
Right? So, it was like, yes, sir, no, sir. And anyway, it's quite interesting because I was pretty much a music fanatic. I loved going to shows. I loved records. I loved music, but of the typical teenage thing of the day, really. So massive fan of the Beatles, and after that, I kind of slowly got to realize he had just started the practice. He'd left another firm to start on his own.
Yeah.
He was a refugee in the UK.
Yeah.
From Germany. His parents had been killed during the war.
Right, okay.
And him and his wife were very nice to me.
Yeah.
And I began to find out that he had been specializing in bringing doing accounting work for like American jazz bands.
Okay.
That used to come over. So like the Count Basie Orchestra, things like that. And it was basically from one client of ours who was a theatrical agent, a booking agent, had a booking agency. And it was just sort of starting to diversify from the jazz bands into some of the pop bands of the day. So we landed, I think I can say the names anyway, you know, bands were like the Animals and the Dave Clark Five, who were really having a lot of success in that mid-1960s.
So it was becoming more commercial and lucrative.
Yeah. The business was turning from a very staid and, you know, opera singers and proper singers to these long-haired monsters, really. Right?
And were you fans of those as well? Because you were young.
Yeah. And then, you know, suddenly I was being asked to drive up to St Albans and get a contract signed for the Animals. And I'm thinking, whoa, what? Cool. This is really cool, you know, right? And so, began to take an interest. And this agent started to get bigger and bigger and get more and more pop stars and DJs and things like that, and would pass them on to us to act for them on an accountancy level. So this was pretty good for me. And then I used to get sent to his office to do his accounts and his books and everything else. And he tutored me, really.
Yeah.
Took a bit of a shine to me. And
you was his only employee?
No. He had quite a large company at that point.
Oh, right.
So they were still doing the Frank Sinatras and Dean Martins and the jazzers of this world, but they developed this rock pop industry.
Yeah.
And it got to a stage where it was like, well, I don't want anybody else coming here. I just want Colin.
Really?
Yeah. But there wasn't anybody else either. There was only three of us.
No, but you'd harnessed your skills.
I'd
so is this after you've
I'd started to
then?
gain my... No, it's just before I qualified.
So still during that 5-year period.
And then I was doing some work for a disc jockey called Tony Blackburn. And then Tony was mentioning me on the radio, going, I'm going to see my accountant this afternoon, Colin Newman. I go, whoa.
Famous.
You know, big head. And I thought, do you know what? I better get these exams. I really need to actually do it.
Yeah.
And that was a kind of kicker to me.
That's probably the most rock and roll I've ever heard an explanation of doing accountancy.
A bit of a long story, but you know.
But no, it's
But basically, I was pissing about, you know, in terms of I wasn't studying.
Yeah.
You know, I took my first exam. I think it was called the intermediate exam, and did no work at all. I was out. My parents went away. I was out every night doing naughty things, and I failed.
Yeah,
and I thought,
naturally.
oh my God, I failed. This is like, hang on, if you want a lesson in something, fail first.
Yeah.
Right? So I realised after that the only way I could get anywhere with these people who were then calling me their accountant was actually to qualify. So I then worked hard, took all my exams and back-to-back passed, and then qualified.
Nice.
And then when I qualified, because of what I've been doing, he made me a partner immediately in the firm.
Yeah.
By then we had about 4 or 5 people.
Yeah.
But he made me a partner.
Guy.
And
it grew from there. But
it grew from
what
that
makes
point,
you extra interesting is that obviously you moved on from the accountancy over the next ensuing years, and eventually got deeper and deeper into the music business and embedded in other ways.
Yeah, well,
would like to talk about that?
Clear, I didn't actually leave the business, the accounting business. I was doing it, and I had lots of interesting clients. But I was looking at this client base around the mid 1980s, and I was thinking to myself, well, they're all getting old. I mean, this lot are going to be retired soon, not going to be working anymore. What I do, you know, maybe I could do something else. And at that time, I was very keen. I'd started to mess around with the recording rights situation. I'd had a client whose rights were in a company that was managed by his manager at the time, and that company had gone bust. It had gone into liquidation, and all the ownership of the rights had gone to the Crown. And so I had to investigate and see what the possibilities were. And then I managed to approach the Crown solicitor, and it's a long process, but essentially we got the rights, the recording rights back for the artist.
Okay.
So he got to own them. And I thought, well, this is quite a good thing. You know, this is a possibility about rights for the future with other clients and so on and so forth. So, you know, doing that was interesting. And as I said, about mid 1980s, thinking, look, the clients I've got, they've been going 10 or 12 years. This is a young person's business. You know, they're going to be dying off. So at that stage, I decided with a friend of mine to start a little record label. And we basically went to all the major record companies, and we released, we put together a package of about 30 albums of compilations. Label was called Action Replay, meaning it's coming back. You know? At that time, nobody was doing compilation records.
Really?
Yeah. So we would do basically best of rock, best of blues, best of jazz, best of reggae.
Now now albums out at that
No,
point?
no.
All right, so this was before that time.
Yeah. We kind of pioneered this approach, but it was incredibly difficult. So we would do an album, say, of 15 tracks of rock, best of rock, and that would involve getting 15 licenses from the major record labels. And so my partner, who was from Wolverhampton, was I always called him a double glazing salesman, but he was pretty good. And we went to all these major record labels, and they all agreed.
Really?
You know, yeah, okay, because nobody was doing it.
Yeah,
they thought they were off their rocker, you know. And so we manufactured them, made a deal with a distributor, and lo and behold, after shipping 30,000 records into Woolworths, we discovered that the distributor was going bust.
Oh, God.
So we spent a year
as did Woolworths
years later, yeah. Anyway, we spent about a year trying to get ourselves out of that particular hole, and managed to do so. But it really gave me the initial focus into how to manufacture, distribute records, how to put rights together, and so on and so forth. And at that stage, then I had contacts with a lot of labels and was lucky enough to manage to buy one of the labels, and that was in 1986.
We're not going to mention the label's name, but it was a big independent label.
It had been a big independent label that had sunk down to 3 employees.
Yeah.
It had been purchased by a man who owned a record pressing plant, who was an amazing, incredible individual entrepreneur who I also learned a lot from. And he owned this plant, and so he knew when anybody was going bust.
Yeah, because
they couldn't pay him. So he would go in and buy the label, but he would do it in an absolutely tip-top professional, legal way.
Yeah.
So, you know, you would go to all of the right people, go to the courts, get the rights to buy the assets off of the liquidator, which actually a few people were operating on at the time. And there were quite a few high-profile liquidations where the rights went to somebody who bought the rights without the obligation to pay royalties to the artists.
Really?
There's a lot of artists, even still today, that are being exploited by one of those companies.
Really?
Yeah. And they do not pay artists royalties.
Gosh.
Because they bought off of a liquidator at that time without the obligation. So again, more lessons, you know, everything you do.
So in simple terms, they've bought the music copyright, and they're pocketing any royalties that they would have been obligated to pay out to the
and exploiting the records, or releasing them and licensing them to third parties.
Does that kind of stuff still happen?
Yeah,
really.
Yeah. Well, some of those dodgy operators are still in business,
right? Which
is quite surprising.
Yeah,
but there you go. And so as efforts on the record label started to pay rewards, let's say, I thought to myself, well, hang on, what advice do I often give people, which is the grass isn't greener on the other side, you know, stick to what you know. So I thought, well, hang on, I'm going to stick with the accountancy and business management practice, but I'll do the record stuff and publishing alongside it.
Yeah.
And, you know, engage.
Did you have any time to sleep or?
No. I would say it really at that time I developed into a 2-job / 3-job cycle, which gave me the first inroad into the obvious, which is you earn what you work hard, you get rewards, and it's all about effort.
Absolutely.
And I think that, you know, to do that, you need an understanding family who are behind you and see what the opportunities are.
Yeah.
And as it so happens, my wife was working for the company, and we made a decision to basically put everything we needed into the business and not worry about anything else.
Yeah, amazing.
And she did her bit and I did my bit.
Yeah.
And it kind of paid off, you know.
Well, that's a great lesson, especially to the youngsters these days. And obviously, it doesn't always pay off, but it did in this case. So you obviously ended up making that record label a success.
Yeah.
And then selling that onwards. Yeah. Eventually.
What we did is we restored the rights that this record label had because documents were not there, missing. And I'll tell you quite interesting, funny story about the first artist. That we determined that we had to see people and talk to them.
Okay.
The first artist came in was actually a producer of a famous album. And he hadn't been paid by the predecessors, and obviously he was after his royalties. This meeting lasted about 7 or 8 minutes, and then he tipped my desk over on me.
Tipped my
desk over, in the office, and shouting and screaming and stormed out the building. I thought, oh my God, what are we let ourselves in for? And the girls were going, should we call the police?
Oh
I went,
my
no,
God.
let's just deal with it.
So you had security guards there after?
No, but we got him back, and then we properly did it, and then we remade the deal, and it gave us a focus of how to proceed, which was by trying to be
a fair deal for when
deal with artists,
exactly,
but also maintaining something that for us would be for the future. So we wanted to acquire rights, basically, and I knew that was going to be a future. So we did that, and I ran that particular record company. We built it up by re-signing every single artist that had been on the label, and a lot of hard work, and also we developed a particular expertise in how to re-record the music from a record.
Right.
And
okay.
So part of my hobby had always been a record collector. So I would go up and down the country buying records. And I went back into the market and bought every single record that had ever been released on this label through the marketplace, and finding people that had these specialist records and so on and so forth. I always remember one story, a guy, I think it was kind of South London, he said, I've got a load of records for you, but you've got to come down and you've got to hear it and make sure they're okay. So I went to his house at 6:00. And he insisted on playing every single record I wanted to buy.
How many were there?
There was a lot of records. I left at 7 a.m. in the morning.
Oh, you're joking.
I've been all night listening to this music that I actually truly didn't like at all.
Oh, no.
Oh my God, the things that I will do to make things happen, But it was a great moment. And actually, when I did sell the label, I didn't sell the record library.
Really?
I would not have actually sold the record label if it had meant passing.
Well, it was too personal to you.
It was too personal.
Yeah.
I didn't feel the label was my baby, but the records were.
Yeah. Have you still got them now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's amazing.
Absolutely.
I mean, I suppose that naturally takes us on to a topic which you specialize in. You've given your background eloquently, but you also obviously started as an accountant, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
So involving all of those worlds and talking about music rights as you have, I suppose you've organically landed in the space of estate planning. And how you can give could you give some tips on estate planning, particularly when it's focused on music IP? So
but this was very important procedures, I think, to follow, because obviously a lot of people when they're younger have really no thoughts about death and wills and planning for death duties and that sort of thing, and it kind of hits a lot of people at a much later stage in their life. And if they've been successful, obviously IP rights have grown in value, even in the last 10, 15 years, enormously. So it's an interesting situation because I couldn't give you the specifics, but many years ago there was a tax case with, I think it was an actress, and how would you describe the royalty flow on post-death? Was it income or was it capital? And the revenue won the case. And so if you, for example, want to sell your rights individually, it's taxable in the UK to income tax, which is diverse from a lot of other countries in the world where they accept it's a capital sale. And you would think that the IP rights should be a capital sale, but still nobody has managed to upset the revenue on that one. And there's a lot of diversity, because I've had clients where we've done a deal for 5 members of a band and we've not acted for their taxes, and they've individually reported, and 3 of them got income tax treatment and 2 of them got capital treatment.
So they're not even sure themselves.
No. So you get these diverse, opinions, obviously, at those levels, not at a higher level, of course. But sometimes at a reasonable level, it's a bit of a mishmash.
But I suppose it's quite individual, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very
individual. To a catalogue compared to cash and property.
There are so many indicators that become relevant. Right. So, for example, in general inheritance tax planning, you can die, leave everything to your wife, and there's no inheritance tax. On the other hand, you push the problem down the road because then it's a problem for the wife. And so you got the situation where, you have to look at that kind of general planning aspect of, well, obviously the first question is IP rights. need to be essentially valued, right?
Yeah.
Value is very much beauty's in the eyes of the beholder.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask, how would you?
Well, with great
value a
difficulties.
catalogue, yeah.
So, and this is where it isn't just financial. You do need to have some musical knowledge. So, for example, if somebody hands you a schedule of songs, you've got to go, well, who's recorded them? Who's released them? You can have songs that recorded, released on a dodgy label, and they never pay copyright royalties.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's very, very important that you understand the music that you're dealing with on evaluation. Which are the big songs? Which are the songs that have earned money? Then you've got to be sure that what the relevant rights are pertaining to that particular song. I think you and I did a sale for a client where that was very much one song that had been earning all the money.
Yeah. And
truly it was a genre of music that was outside of my general awareness, right? And I would never have picked that as a valuable song in a million years.
No.
But actually the value of the catalogue rested on that one particular song.
Yeah.
So I think
which would make it riskier and potentially therefore a lesser value.
Yeah. So I think again, you can't just be, or it's not good if you're just a financial person.
Yeah.
Valuing and so on and so forth without genuine knowledge about either the artists, who pays the royalties, who collects the royalties, and making sure who owns the rights, which kind of leads on very much to that you need to basically do a contract assessment. Very few artists I've found maintain, like, if you like, a constant ledger of contracts, right? So I've been helping on a client recently, and the writers are both dead, 2 writers, and the compositions were recorded, released, and 2 or 3 of them were in big stage theatrical productions around 1961, 62. So that's a hell of a long time ago.
Yeah.
But rights were given in that time period that are impactful today.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things, and so you really need to go back and look. So in this particular case, we've had to look at his will. Was there a letter of wishes? We're pretty sure there would have been a letter of wishes. No one's ever been able to find it. And that again is something that when you're looking at maybe tidying up affairs, is just to be articulate.
I think that's sensible. The first point of estate planning is trying to establish what money you've got coming in before you can even try and make that efficient. And in terms of music copyrights, that's establishing all the contracts, which might be difficult to obtain if it's older contracts.
But also with the contracts, you've got to be able to have a trusted either lawyer or business manager, like what we do, who understands what they're reading and can understand and see if there are any holes in the report.
It's usually, just to let everyone know, they're usually hidden, aren't they? If something's going to be beneficial to one party and not another, they're not going to put it in big black bold writing.
No, and they're not going to tell you.
Yeah, you need to know what to look out for. Yeah, it's very important.
The biggest, one of the biggest problems, and you can look in the sort of current history of estates, and I'd say mostly American, where the relatives that live after the death of the artist can't agree on anything. And in general terms, they probably have a huge lack of knowledge. So there's a knowledge gap as to A, how it works, B, what the contracts mean, C, where the money's coming from, and so high level executives are very important. So you can go back, and most of the estates that I can think of off the top of my head, like the Marley estate, Hendrix estate, Frank Zappa estate, James Brown,
Michael Jackson,
Michael Jackson, so many of them, have taken years to resolve.
I've not heard of any of them. Are they from the?
They're all from the 60s, 70s, mate. Wanker.
But you're saying, big name artists, lots of money,
big estates.
The family will probably have potentially have a dispute,
especially if some of these contracts, which some do and some don't, have approval rights. So, for example, there's the first one. You got to kind of try to release some product that may have been unreleased or whatever, and then the beneficiaries have to reach agreement if they have approval rights, and they don't for whatever reason. So it's kind of a tricky one. There's also been a lot of changes in American legislation in recent years, whereby they kind of pioneered a reversionary rights period. So it didn't actually matter what contract you'd signed. You could have signed rights in America to an American company for the world in perpetuity, which would be the usual thing from 60s, 70s, 50s, period, right? But that you had the heirs had a statutory right to a reversion after somewhere around 36 years.
Yeah.
Right. And then there were very tight windows and timetables in which you could give a notice of reversion. And there's a lot of this still going on. And there's a lot of complexities attached to the American rules and regulations.
This doesn't apply in the UK. This is an American only.
This is only in America. In the UK, the rights were originally on, say, for example, master recordings were 50 years.
Yeah.
Well, 50 years is not a terribly long period. And then we engaged some new legislation, which basically added potentially another 20 years, right? But this right, I think, came into play for recordings post-October 1962.
Yeah.
Right. And this, interestingly enough, left out of copyright one official release by EMI Parlophone of a Beatles record. So the first Beatles record came out just before that date.
Yeah.
Love Me Do.
Do you think that influenced the decision on?
Well, I think it probably, but it's actually out of copyright. So anybody can release that record.
Yeah.
As long as you pay publishing royalties on it, it's available for release. Anything October 1962 is available, which, just as an anecdotal point, incidentally, was I then devised a creation of a piece of my record library. And I called it pre-1963.
Yeah.
Right. And so every record I get that was released that's got pre-1963 on it goes into a separate collection.
Yeah.
Because they're all
of that reason.
They're all out of copyright.
Yeah.
Well, that means it's actually you are having the record, but it's really potentially a master recording.
Yeah.
You can you can dub it, re-record it.
Yeah.
I was going to say a bit earlier, one of the points when I said to you about going out and buying records for the label I bought was that we developed an expertise. There was a new computer system came out. So you could even take an old 78 RPM record, which is shellac, not plastic, and it would be scratchy. And this system would eliminate all the scratches.
Really? Was that part of the re-record you was specialising in?
And so why I went out buying all the records was to get the full catalogue back. And we kind of developed an expertise of re-recording these singles and albums and then putting them through this digital machine.
Yeah.
So it was the first of its kind. It was
but
developed in Cambridge.
That might seem quite antiquated in the streaming era we're in now to some younger viewers, but that happens now. I've got a big artist who remastered all of his stuff.
Now you can do it at
Dolby
home.
Atmos and everything.
Now you can do it at home. It's so easy. Right?
Yeah, but it still goes on, and they re-release.
I did as a test an album that came out in the late 1980s, where actually we couldn't find all the master tapes and being a bit lazy, but I had all the records in unplayed condition.
Yeah.
And so we dubbed all of the records for this greatest hits album, and not one single person ever knew.
Really?
No, everybody assumed it was tape. You could not tell from listening to it that it had been
from the sound quality.
Dubbed off a disc. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And of course, since those times, it's just got better and better.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we've covered a good few points. Disputes happen. You need to obtain the contractual information to know what you're dealing with, learn about, therefore, from that, the copyright situation.
Just to interrupt there, because
it
goes on all the time. So with a particular client, there's this particular client where there's songs, and a lot of the recordings from 60, 61, some of them very famous musicals.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
And we advised them. We said, well, what you guys need, there are four family members of beneficiaries. So the one composer married twice, had 2 children with each wife.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there are 4 of them. They get on well now.
Yeah.
They had their issues before, but they get on well now. And I advised and said to them, what you need now is a Bible. I don't mean a Bible to pray with.
Yeah.
A Bible of every single document this man signed.
Yes.
And where the rights lie. Because you guys are now in your 60s and you're going to be thinking about this, and what, either you need to sell the rights, which they don't want to do, or you're going to be passing down to the next generation. So you need to look at the next generation.
Do the work for the next generation,
now.
who probably have even less attachment to it.
Absolutely. There will be 3 parts years distance, 3 generations distance, you know, right? So that was pretty good, because obviously from a realistic point of view, we've been commissioned with the American attorney, and we made an arrangement with them to do it jointly.
Yeah.
So we're supplying some, they're supplying stuff. You know, obviously it has to be paid for.
Yes.
And I suppose that was the part they didn't like most.
It's everyone, isn't it?
Yeah.
But
eventually they saw that we weren't giving this advice because it benefited us.
No.
We're giving this advice because that will be a massive template for them for the future.
Yeah.
Either for a sale or for passing down the generations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, talking about a catalogue sale then, so hopefully they've compiled that Bible and they've decided to sell for whatever reason or not. How would that typically work? Because obviously you and I have been involved in multiple over the years.
Yeah. I mean, again, it does come back initially to an accounting role.
Yeah.
Right. Where you would need to produce a summary of all the income that's come in over all the different sources. Probably,
which you would only know, Colin, if you had that Bible. You might be missing out sources, right?
Absolutely.
If you hadn't done that due diligence.
But hopefully you would be able to also go back to the books and records.
Yeah, yeah.
And you would have the receipts, so you would have some knowledge from that, and you would produce, I would say, either a 3 or 5 year summary. I say that because you can get away with 3, but 5 might be more beneficial to you.
Well, I did valuations. I could only get 3 years.
Yeah.
But it was around the COVID years. So in that instance where there's outliers and anomalies, you'd want 5, right?
Yeah.
But
that's a very good example. COVID, which would be maybe positive because people will buy more music or listen to more.
Yeah.
Who knows, you know, but the point is, what I always say to people, look for 5 years. And if you think, if it gives a better number than 3, use 5. It's just
unless you're buying it.
but you know, you're going to reach an agreement with a buyer over what you're going to give them.
Yeah.
Right. So I think, you know, compilation of the numbers is a first port of call, and then review of the marketplace in general, because obviously the marketplace has been quite volatile, and I'm more in favor of using a multiple of earnings, because my small brain can equate a multiple of earnings to a percentage, which means interest rates. So, for example, a multiple of 20 times earnings is equal to a 5% return.
Yeah.
You know, so with that variation in interest rates, of course, a lot of the investment companies are putting up all this money. They're not really interested whether they're signing Bob Marley or David Bowie or an unknown artist. They just want to know what the rate of return is.
Because there's potential buyers out there for any estates that do have to sell. A kind of new one, as you've just alluded to there, are kind of investment companies that see it as a good rate of return.
Yeah.
But other than the typical labels.
There's a little bit of life where everybody is a little bit of a train spotter. You know,
way?
But the investment advisor who goes, I just bought Jimi Hendrix's, you know.
Especially if they're not in the music world and they're business finance.
Exactly. It's a great blag, let's say. You know, I'm not saying that applies, but I think that it does a little bit. You know?
I've just bought Michael Jackson's catalogue.
Well, exactly.
Did you meet him?
I have to go a long way to meet him.
You'd be lying if you said but that's true. Yeah.
So multiples are a good way, and then multiples themselves are completely dependent on the strength of the catalogue and the strength of the music. So, for example, if you know, recently I was involved in a thing that had 7 number 1 hits. Well, you know, you're not going to settle for anything other than a top level multiple buyout.
Yeah.
You know, so I got some terrible offers on it. You know, I went to about 5 or 6 different people, and that, you know, I'd offers of anywhere from sort of like 10% to 25%.
Do that in multiple, 25 being 4, 10% being 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what?
Low.
Yeah.
Low ball.
Low.
Yeah.
Low.
Well, you
but
mentioned
multiple of 25 was incredible.
Yeah.
You know, whereas a multiple of 10 was terrible.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you know,
big range.
And some of the people at the lower level will actually have fronted. What do you mean it's a good offer? I went, no, it's not. So it shows you, as I said, back to the beauties in the eyes of the beholder.
Yeah.
Right. But again, this also comes into play that you've got to know your music.
Yeah.
You know,
to know its worth.
The clients that I've been dealing with, I've been acting for many years. I've probably orchestrated quite a bit of the return of the copyright from other companies by means pleasant or foul. Let's say,
a few
joking,
thrown, let's say.
yeah. But for example, one catalogue, it was owned by one of the major labels, and they wanted to put out a best of greatest hits. They thought they could sell 100,000 copies, and we went, yeah, that's great, but we're not going to do it unless you end this perpetual right.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what can we do? I said, well, we'll leave certain rights with you, but after X, Y, Z years, the catalogue must revert back to us clients as the owner.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of these big companies, like, you want something back today, you're not going to get it. If you plan it well and say, well, we'll do it in 5 years' time, believe it or not, those 5 years go past, wham, bam, you got it back.
So there's more of a chance if you say, look, you can have it for 5 years in perpetuity. 10 years.
It's about the negotiation.
Well, any deal has to have a winner on both sides.
Yeah. So it's about the negotiation, and they thought this catalogue was dead, but they knew there was a good sale in a best of because they had 7 number 1 hits.
Yeah, exactly.
And they weren't. So, and I said to them, well, okay, that's fine. But, I want to release the full catalogue. I want to release all the 14 albums that you guys are not even interested in. So again, they had to play ball. And then I took the 14 albums to somebody else and made a deal to spread it, releasing over a period of 5 or 7 years. And then that held it for then. And then everything reverted and came back.
Nice. But you knew the music.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not just the numbers.
It's not just the numbers.
Literally the name of the podcast, isn't it? Hey, accidental, but
What can I say, mate? That's your contribution. So that wasn't intended to be negative.
Let's get some more contribution from you then. So,
oh, blimey.
A question that I've seen a lot, well, a scenario I've seen a lot. Why do you think, or what do you think families misunderstand about royalties after death? You mentioned earlier the estate, the children perhaps, or the wife. They're probably not an artist or probably not in the music business. They're probably not going to know really as much as the original source of where the assets came from. And so they need advisors to help them. So they'll probably misunderstand how royalties work after the death of.
I think it's very much a misunderstanding. They probably have actually not a clue.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're just getting money.
I wouldn't have a clue what my dad, his business,
you get
or
from
my mum's.
Associations, from the Performing Rights Society, different flows of income. A lot of them don't know what is publishing royalty, what is record royalty, what is a neighbouring rights royalty. And I've had bands who've been going for many, many years, very successfully managed and the rest of it. Career kind of comes to an end. And even the artists themselves have been so used to having everything done for them that they actually don't know that, they'll sit down one day and a cup of tea and go, can you explain what a publishing royalty is to me?
Yeah. The longer that goes on and you're more established,
it's very much more old school that, because obviously today a lot of kids are very, very switched on.
Definitely.
There's so many more methods of learning, but for older relatives who inherit, I found as well, I've been quite successful at acting for some of these estates to business manage. And what I've learned is that you can advise them on something. Often they'll go, that sounds right. They'll question, but they don't really know the full answer.
Yeah.
But they're always very happy when you send them a quarterly statement going, there's XYZ due to you. Any questions, let me know. And the only question is, how quickly can I have the money? Which is
if
kind
you read
of
the
cool.
contract, you'd know.
Well, no, I don't teach a house builder how to build a house.
Exactly. So I'll ask you a difficult question then.
Go for it.
Is it better to sell sooner or later in terms of your father's just died? Shall I sell immediately? Shall I sell in the future?
That's a very difficult question, Danny, right? And basically, as a waiver,
it's a loaded question.
As a waiver of not being authorised to give investment advice.
I just want a black or white answer, please.
Yeah, mate. If you could toss a coin, that's got 2 sides, one of them's a winner, right? It's very, very difficult. First of all, I was doing a transaction with one of the major labels, right? And I had discussions with 4 or 5 different people, and right until the death, nobody came up with realizing that the catalogue actually only had 18 years left before the copyright reverted. before they went out of copyright.
Yeah. When you don't earn no money.
No.
Yeah.
No. Well, mostly you don't earn any money, right? So it was going on. And then I thought to myself, well, how do you value this? Because you would normally think this is worth 20 times the annual income, but it's only in copyright for 18 years.
That's a non-starter, that one, but yeah.
Well, none of them realised it.
Oh, really?
Not one of the record companies, including a major, actually came up with that point.
That's astonishing.
So
really.
That's a factor. Is you've got to look and go, well, how is there? Especially if it's older copyrights, is there a cap on the potential earning period?
So say you had 15. We did another one, didn't we? Where I think it was about 15 years left.
Yeah.
Would you say wait to the end and just take all the money, but then it ends, or sell it and see if you could get better?
Well, it depends on how much you're going to get.
Yeah.
I mean, you can evaluate what you might earn over 15 years. A period, right? And what you could get now by selling for maybe 10 times, and then have that
guaranteed
money to your pocket and availability, spread it amongst your beneficiaries, your children.
Yeah.
You could give them some money on the annual exemption amounts. You could give them annual money out of your excess income.
Yeah.
Or you could just make them a straight gift and hope you live 7 years and doesn't get taxed.
That's a benefit of selling it sooner.
It is.
And sorting it out sooner, yeah.
And publishing is better because publishing's got a longer term copyright period beyond the death of the author, whereas recordings are based upon the original release date of the recordings, making it available to the public.
So it's the life of the artist or the writer. That's the difference. It's huge.
So you've got to look at those things. Then you've got to look at and know a bit about your music. So, for example, if you're looking at a band, are they dead in the water? Or does their music still get played a lot? Do they get their songs in adverts, for example? A client of mine who wrote two clients in the company wrote, I'm not going to say who, but you might guess, but a very famous Christmas song. And there was also a scene in a movie about a boy. Another, I better not say client, but another artist who said, in the movie, the boy said to him, "Where'd you make your money?" He goes, "My dad wrote a Christmas song," right? And I couldn't get off the floor laughing, and everybody in the cinema going, "What's wrong with him?"
Oh, in the cinema?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And I thought it was very funny because obviously that...
Couldn't you hold it in?
I couldn't hold it in. But that song will earn, a shed load of money every single Christmas, come what may.
Exactly.
It's in this country as well. It's in every shopping mall.
Exactly. It's one of the top three.
It's on every compilation and so on and so forth. So you've got it again.
You mentioned ties to Wolverhampton earlier, didn't you?
I did.
Let's leave it at that.
So it is very much every
individual,
there's no
right?
rule. You've got to be individual. You've got to have an open mind.
Yeah.
You've got to understand the catalogue. You've also got to understand the buyer's desire to buy.
Yeah,
so
how the market is as well, right?
For example, a lot of every week now you can read in the music press, Joe Blow's raised 100 million.
Joe who?
Joe Blow. It's a fictitious name.
Okay. Joe Blow, isn't it?
Joe Bloggs. Okay. I'm happy with Joe Blow, but it's nothing personal. So they've got to spend the money.
Yeah.
So they're in a rush to spend the money, whereas normally you're kind of in a rush to sell, right?
Yeah.
So it's horses for courses, and. It's a funny one as well because when they raise 100 million, to be credible, they've got to spend it quickly, and so they're really looking for a deal for 20,
That's
30
interesting,
million.
actually. Yeah, I've never really thought about that. If you've got these kind of funded companies,
if they're stuck with the money,
they can't.
No, because most probably they're on an interest rate back to the investors.
Exactly.
And so it's got to go out.
Yeah.
Which is a sort of interesting dynamic in the negotiation of a buy and a sale, really.
Yeah.
As to who wants what more, and then of course if you are selling, it's quite a good idea to have at least two people on the go.
As in buyers.
Always. So you can manage.
In selling anything.
Yeah. You can manage, your cards go down.
But it also calibrates
two people.
You never, even as an expert like you, You said there's so many different factors. I think we've covered most important ones, but the market might be different. The appetite of the buyers might be different, just as kind of macro factors.
Yeah.
If you've only got one offer for, say, $1 million,
yeah,
you haven't got any kind of calibration. If another guy is offering 2 million, you go, whoa, I need to, but you need to have multiple buyers and contacts.
And
I suppose
contacts are very important. I've just been asked by some family beneficiaries to think about selling some publishing, and I did previously sell the masters for them. So they got publishing and masters, quite famous, quite thing, and it's with one of the major labels, right? And that particular major label had said they're not buying anymore at the moment. But I was talking to them, and I said, oh, well, we're allowed to buy if we've already got a connection to it.
You sold the masters to them?
Exactly. So suddenly they're going, oh, no, we're really interested.
Because they've had from the top, we can't buy anything. There's a little out there for them. So you get keen.
The focus and supply the information. So the first thing I did was I went to the company that currently exploits these songs, right? And they had been saying to me, we're very keen to buy, right? So
so the rights were running out, I'm guessing.
No, they're in perpetual rights.
Perpetual,
so for them, it would just be a buyout of having to pay.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So the major company that owns the rights in perpetuity came up with 2 offers.
Okay.
Right. I couldn't say too much other than both of them were crap. Right. And I find this more and more, although you would think there's a marriage value to these people, they're actually got this corporate approach of, well, we've already got it. We don't really want to spend the money.
Yeah.
So they give you a rubbish offer. So I'm not going to say how much, but I went to this other company and then I got an offer from them of almost twice what the other company offered. Yeah. So then I put it to the client. I said, well, I've got this offer. I'm not sure we're at the end yet, but also it's the way they all deal with it is different. So this particular company, for example, you're not going to get an offer in writing.
Really?
They're going to call you. They're going to tell you how hard they've worked and how much they've stretched, and this is my final offer.
No backup to the amount. Just nothing. This is what it is.
Yeah, and they give the offer.
Right.
So fair enough. I don't push those when I know that's their trained tactic.
Yeah.
Hope I'm not saying too much here. giving the stories away.
Secrets of the trade.
Secrets, yeah. But so I sent it to the client, right, and had occasion to look back on this particular client's affairs, because my immediate reaction anyway was, what was the value in probate? Now, also to stress, by the way, that we were not acting as the accountants. We do not act as the accountants of these people. I just do business management for them of looking after the rights.
Yeah.
So I looked it up. And so eventually they managed to get the probate figure for me. It took some time. The lawyer that had done it just didn't respond. Then I started asking him eventually, right? And then I discovered that there was a value, and there
had to have been, right?
Yeah, there had to have been a value for probate because it was going to not a wife. It was taxable to IHT.
Yeah,
and then discovered that when they made the first sale, the accountants got it wrong completely.
In what way?
They put the numbers wrong. They got it wrong.
So the value that was in the probate documentation wasn't the number the accountants
was, but they used it against the first sale. They didn't use it against all the sales. So there's a gap coming up, which impacts on the current transaction, meaning they've got no cost attached, and therefore they're likely to be paying a higher capital gains tax rate if they were to proceed. And then they basically said to me, well, we're going to think this over because we think maybe we won't sell right now.
So the people that sold their masters still had their rights to the publishing, put the whole of the value in the accounts against the masters, leaving nothing for the publishing. And so basically a bigger tax bill coming up.
Yeah.
That's the kind of things you need to be thinking about.
Yeah. And effectively that's made them think twice about selling, because obviously the thing that's going straight through their head is this catalogue will continue to earn decent money. Will it be more? Will it be less? I couldn't answer that, because the answer is how long's a piece of string?
Yeah.
You just don't know. Where something's going to come. But they have several songs in the catalogue that could suddenly figure in a major TV advert, for example. If you've got a Super Bowl ad in America, you're on to millions of dollars.
But you said earlier that you've got early 60s songs that might have been slowly wavering, earning a low amount, and it's been relatively stable, and suddenly it's in
comes
the
up
Super
and earns
Bowl.
a lot of money,
With the Kate Bush one in Stranger Things. There's loads of examples of it, and sync obviously tends to be high value.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But you can't predict that.
No, you can't predict. You can't predict, and you know, I mean, you could imagine the phone call coming in, can't you? That you've sold their catalogue for say 5 million, you know, and then a year later, Super Bowl comes up,
give you 5 million for
one song, and they're going to be on the phone. You go, why did you let me sell?
I think on syncs though, you can never. No one in it. If they say I can 100% tell you they're lying. Well, however, if you look at more years worth of historic income, and importantly, if you know the music, certain songs are syncable.
Yeah, no,
and
absolutely.
You know the music, you know what the kind of culture of the time is, and you go, I can sense this. Maybe you know, you mentioned like the Animals.
Yeah,
you know they've got a song that's very syncable.
Yeah.
You can imagine maybe you know in this kind of day and age that might come up in the next 5 years on a sync.
Yeah.
So it's also knowing the music as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah,
and also in terms of all of this really, but in particular if you've plans with your estate and you do want to sell your catalogue, it's all important about having contacts, which you obviously do. So do you have contacts in with all the majors, all the indies?
And I think absolutely. I think one of the things I equate to, which may be nonsense, like some of the things I say, you know, is that how do you know? How do you know, you know, what to do, where to do, what to advise? But you know, it would be the equivalent of SRLV employing a high-level person that had been engaged at HMRC and bringing them on board here, where you know both sides of the fence, you know both arguments, and I think sometimes that's what I bring to the table. I've got good knowledge on the IHT front as regards IP rights, and a very good knowledge on the technical side, and a good knowledge on flows of income, where it comes from and where it's wrong or where it's right, or where there have been misuses on contracts. So it's a bit like being on both sides of the fence at different times. You know?
If you've been on both sides of the deal, then you know which other wants to hear.
Exactly.
That's the only way to get a deal done. I think people watching this, hopefully, because I've certainly found it very interesting.
Thank you.
Would have, you know, perhaps learned a lot about how these deals work, how complicated they are. I mean, they are, and we've only scratched the surface, really, haven't we? But and how valuable it is for someone who can. Yeah,
it's kind of refreshing, you know, that you still got to have the client make the decision to go with it or not.
Of course,
you know, and often
here's scenario A and B. What do you want to do?
You're dealing with a widow, you know, very nice lady approaching 70. You know, who by own admission knows nothing about, you know, loved her husband and anything that he did.
Yeah, the emotional side we haven't touched.
Emotional side, you know, because you've got to part with his rights.
Yeah,
you know,
might be connected to them in some way.
And then the investment advisor with the sniff of money is breathing down her neck, thinking, oh, you know, she's going to get some decent money, right? And so, you know, every single step you make is proceed with caution.
Actually, you've given so many tips. I'll give one tip to end this on that. You've reminded me. I think if you have come into obtaining through the death of a husband or a father or whatever, some music copyrights, people will be around you like piranhas, won't they?
Yeah.
Don't sign anything until you've spoke to someone. We have seen it so many times, and I genuinely hate it. I imagine, you know, I've got a daughter and a son. If I wrote a hit song, probably going to happen at some time, and they got it, the piranhas would be around them. I would say to them, speak to a Colin, speak to someone before you sign anything.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and probably don't act quickly.
Yes, take your time.
Take time. Nothing really turns on doing anything quickly unless you need money, right?
But even then, you want to get the most money.
Getting it right is very important because, you know, if you die, you haven't sold, you've retained your IP rights, you know, what's going to happen is at date of death, you're going to be looking for a valuation of those rights.
Yeah.
It's going to attract a large tax bill. I mean, let's say rights could easily be 10 to 20 million. And suddenly, you know, you've got to find 40%. And so you're probably going to the beneficiary probably going to have to be selling or borrowing or doing something at that point because they're not going to be able to pay the IHT.
Yeah.
Right. So not doing anything is not a good example. I had a client recently and he's 84 now and he's been very successful over his lifetime and career. And I asked him, well, you know, should we do some planning? What should we do? And he said to me, nah, he goes, I'm all right. He says, I'll remarry the ex-wife on my deathbed. Right? I said, well, that's a brilliant move, mate. But what happens if you get a stroke?
It's not a flawless plan.
All he did was laugh his head off. And another client, when we were talking about executors, and he goes, "That's not a problem." He goes, "I'm going to live to 100." I go, "Okay, no problem, mate."
Yeah, all right. Let's see.
So people's attitude to death is quite interesting.
Yeah, it's quite a hard topic to breach.
It's a very hard topic.
Thanks for speaking about it with me, mate.
Okay, mate. Good to see you.
Nice one.
Yeah.
Over the top.
Over the top, mate.